Welcome back to the show, everyone. I am delighted to have a very special guest here today. Her name is Jennifer C. Martin, and we are just going to run right into having her introduce herself, give you a little bio, and we'll chat about why she is here on Passionate Pursuits and why we are still talking authentic relationships, which I have found to be so important and transformational for the people who've been able to tune in. So welcome, Jennifer. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Bridget. So like Bridget said, I am Jennifer C. Martin. I am a writer and an editor, living out of Richmond, Virginia. And I am known primarily for writing about being polyamorous and being a Christian at the same time, which, is really out of left field for people who are both polyamorous and Christian. I was raised in a very conservative Christian home, Church of God, which is a Pentecostal denomination in Cleveland, Tennessee. And now I'm living here in Richmond, and I live with my two partners, Daniel and Ty, and my two kids who are almost 13 and 10. And we live in this little like 5-person, quiet, pretty boring, all things considered, polyamorous like household. And and I guess in my spare time I like to do yoga, gardening. I'm really in tune with a lot of I still am like very much involved in theology. I'm a member of the United Church of Christ. I go to church every Sunday. So it's not that I'm just like labeling, I mean, not that you have to go to church to be a Christian or anything, but I do go to church. A lot of people think like, oh, you're just like you're just like taking the label for cultural reasons. And it's like, nope.
I'm curious, what made you want to stay in the church?
So, I will admit that like probably the biggest thing was the fact that I had kids, and like until they were around like 3 and 5, I think their ages were, they had only had exposure to the sort of church that I brought them up in, talking about hell, talking about really conservative fundamentalist theology that I didn't agree with. And I thought, this isn't the exposure that like I want my kids to have to Christianity, but I want them to know that there's an alternative, because I had been like deconstructing before I actually left my church. My husband was working for the church at the time, and I just like did not like I had been already researching like United Church of Christ. I was like, here's the one in Richmond that I want to go to. Here's like I believe what they believe. And like he got fired from that job for drinking a beer and like posting it to Instagram. Like, yeah, like he just like opened it, was grilling and drinking a beer and posted to Instagram. So that church fired him for that. And like we went the next week to the UCC church. We didn't even have like a break in between. Like I had just been deconstructing for so long. I'd been getting really interested in like Episcopalian churches, like Episcopalian theology. I had been like reading Rachel Held Evans, reading all kinds of like what I would call like beginner deconstruction books, and just getting really into it. And you know, I realized like maybe like it would be easier to be an atheist or something, but I just like wasn't. Like, I don't know. I feel like atheism is something you either are or you aren't. And I do believe in a higher power, even like, and so I wanted to still honor that. And I'm still a big fan of Jesus too. Like, so I wanted to honor that. But I also just really wanted my kids to have a different kind of exposure to Christianity than I did, and not think of it as like this scary thing where people go to hell and you have to like I literally lived in like fear a lot as a kid because of just like, oh, I told a lie, or I'm going to hell. Like it was, in Pentecostalism you have the concept of backsliding. So it's like, yeah, like even if you're saved, you could get unsaved. Like, whereas like not all of them have that doctrine. it was scary, and it was, all the Left Behind books are coming out, just like real fire and brimstone religion. So I just knew, if anything, I regret not leaving that church earlier and like staying in there for like financial and familial reasons. But
Yeah. So I'm thinking about your story, and I can't help but kind of think about my own kind of side by side with it. And I'm hearing you saying all these things about growing up like in a faith that made you feel a certain way. And I certainly had a similar experience. Although I grew up Catholic, but same,
yeah.
similar doctrines, same ideas. And I got a lot of questions. Like I just posted an episode. Actually, I posted it this week. I recorded it last month about my coming out story at 38 years old. Right. So I had all these questions like fired at me, like, how could you believe that that's who you are, but you didn't discover it until you were 38 years old? Like I said, listen, I've always known who I was, but it took me that long to not be terrified to actually fully live authentically in who I
Yeah.
was because of, like, I mean, a lot of people are still in that culture who were asking me the questions. I said, just look around you. Like, how would you feel? How would you feel if
Yeah.
that was what you knew to be true about yourself, and yet you're in this culture? Like, what would
Yeah.
you do?
For sure. I know people, specifically in my denomination from my hometown, who like won't even tell their parents that they drink alcohol sometimes, because because Church of God is a big teetotaler religion. So like, I can't imagine if you're like, oh, also I'm gay, or I'm polyamorous, or like maybe I'm not even a Christian, I don't believe in God, or whatever their authentic truth for them is, like they can't even do the most bare minimum like thing. The things that I think that's the thing that I like miss like the least from my hometown, from my old evangelical Pentecostal culture, is just like this idea of keeping everything hidden all the time and just being really private and secret. Like I don't know, it's just like because everybody is in this shame-based culture together, and it's like expected. And then, which is why you would just be like minding your own business, and then all of a sudden some huge rumor or fact comes out, so and so caught cheating on his wife with a man or something similar. And it was so, heartbreaking. People just like live like that, just these entire sham lives that they've set up for themselves, trying so hard to fit into this mold of their community and their culture.
Yeah, for sure. I guess the next question along the line of that is, I know how I did it personally for myself, but how did you even begin to have a conversation around your identity and what you wanted your family to look like with your husband at the time?
Oh, well, so I had no idea where the journey would take me. Like I got married at 20 and had two kids by 25, and I thought, I'm doing it perfect. And I thought that I would be done. Like I thought that would be it, that would be my life, and it would be exactly what I wanted it to be. And then, I just kind of kept falling in love with other people, and I thought I didn't cheat on my husband, but I certainly, like, I guess you like, a little sexting here or there, or like heavy flirting, and like crossing those boundaries and lines repeatedly. And then I would always tell him about it. But eventually, like after we had left our old church and we were going to the new church for a while, this was like separate and unrelated. I just told him, like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to be monogamous for the rest of my life. And it's not because I don't love you, and it's not because I want to leave you, and it's not because I'm not unhappy with our sex life. None of that was true. Um, I was like, I keep having these big crushes on other people, and I don't know when it's going to stop. And I'm afraid that I wouldn't always be able to, like, I don't know. Like, and I said, if you don't want me to pursue this, I'd never heard the word polyamory. I'd never known any form of non-monogamy in my life. Like, I think like the closest I'd ever come to it was like jokes about swingers on TV. And it was always like a joke, right? It was like oh, like LOL, key party, something like that. um and I'm not a swinger, but like, and so we just started, like, he expressed, at first he was like, what if you love me less? What if our love is less special? What if our sex is less special? And so we just like took it really slowly. He agreed to try it out. And we started going to polyamory groups. We started reading books. We started talking to a therapist a little bit. And at that point, I was never like, I'm going to live in a big polyamorous family one day. I just thought maybe I will have sex with someone else, or maybe I will date and like share these sentiments with somebody else. And, um, you know, I had never, it wasn't even that I had just never like been polyamorous before or had any framework that I'd never dated before really. I met Daniel, my husband, when I was 18. I'd had like one high school boyfriend other than that. Um oh, and then also I also knew I was bisexual the whole time also. And so if I, like I like to add that, I almost like add that as an aside. I have two male partners, so it's easy to forget, but like I was able to have sex with somebody of the same gender for the first time in my life
Mm.
when I became polyamorous. And, you know, but I was bad at dating, like not had nothing to do with polyamory. Like I
Yeah.
was like I didn't know how to act around in relationships. I have an anxious attachment style. So but so like I had to, a lot of therapy, a lot of working on myself. And then like everybody I had dated for polyamory, I think I came out as polyamorous in like maybe the end of 2015. And then for the first couple of years, everybody I dated was like I would call already partnered, like me. Like, you
Mm.
know, they just lived at home with their legal spouse or just their primary partner. And then they dated and then they like went home to their primary partners. And like for a long time, that's how I did. And then I met Ty, and Ty did not have a primary partner and he was like single. And so Ty and I started dating in early 2018, and just like slowly we started realizing like, well, I don't think we ever want to leave each other. Like this is feels really serious. And so I sat down, like Daniel and I had never had the assumption of like we would invite anyone to live with us. We have kids. We were like, oh, we have kids, we can't live in a big polyamorous family. But we did know some people who did with kids, and I eventually like I sat down and I asked consent of Daniel and both my children. I was like, Ty is here all the time anyway. They hang out with him, they love him. He's always like he was like helping us host events at our house and things like that. He was always there for every big event. And so I was like, how would we feel about living together in the same house? And they were like, okay, let's do it. And it was the beginning of 2020 that we all moved into a new house together. And like literally the day that we moved in, Ty got a call that like his work was going virtual because of the pandemic. So we ended up not only like all moving in together, but all moving in together and then all being home together.
Oh
Everything was
my God.
virtual. And
That's a lot.
it was a lot, but I loved it. It was like dreamy. It was like ecstatic being able to live that way that I wanted to. I was so happy. And realizing that I could be that happy and not try to force myself into a mold and not try to impress anybody like from my hometown or my family or whatever. I don't know that like it, when I say that it really doesn't bother me what people think of me, like of course sometimes I get my feelings hurt. People are like, "Oh, they call me slurs, they call me like or they think I'm a bad mom, or they call me heretic theology things, like whatever. But really, like the fear of that stuff of people disapproving of me, it doesn't override the fact that I am genuinely so freaking happy in my life. Like, the more authentic and honest I was about what I wanted and what made me happy, the easier it was. I don't feel constantly in conflict. I don't feel constantly, I'm really just pretty chill and pretty happy with the situation that I have.
So many
And
claps to that. Yeah.
yeah, like I don't know why people, and it's hard for me honestly, like, I've come away from where I'm so bitter at my people from my past anymore for the things they believe or taught me or
Yeah.
but I definitely wouldn't want to go back to it. I don't know,
Mm-mm.
like, even if I wasn't polyamorous, I don't think I would want to be in more of a traditional nuclear family either. I think I would want to like live near my sister or live like, I don't want to say like commune. I don't want to be in a cult, but like there's always the chance with polyamory people to like, but like, just like an intentional community, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds great. I've been asking people to join me in doing that for years. So I'm with you. Like, not culty, but an intentional community sounds really great. Cause I don't know what I like tongue in cheek. I'm like, I will live in a commune someday. But yeah, it just struck me. I just had this moment when you're talking about the more authentic and honest you are, the more it's like, oh, this is joyful. Like I had the same experience when I finally got to speak my truth. There was so much joy around that, so much, like I felt so light and so free. And the difference between how I felt before and how I feel now, even with the questions and the slurs and the attacks and all of that, like I don't know. I don't think that I could ever go back to what I was before because it wasn't fully integrated. Like it wasn't the wholeness of who I am.
Yeah.
So I definitely feel you. I feel you there. Um, so how has it felt and what has it looked like to integrate those two parts of your life that are so important to you, like your faith and being out and living in this family that brings you so much joy?
I'll admit that even at my like progressive church, I was nervous. Like when I started bringing, like, I think I probably have brought every single one of my partners to church with me, every single person I've ever dated, which is like, which is like very, very like funny. But, and then Ty started coming more regularly. And then like, like I've never hit, when Ty moved in with us, I didn't hide it. When Ty moved in with us, I didn't hide it. I don't hide aspects of my life on social media. I decided early on that I thought it was really important. I know a lot of people feel like they have to keep their non-monogamy under wrap for a variety of reasons, so I am not judging you. But for me, I just didn't want to put my kids in a position where they had to lie for me or like, keep hide and keep it a secret. And that just teaches them, to me, it just is like, oh, this is something to be ashamed of. And it's like, I'm not ashamed of it. This is how I'm living my life. Um, and so I was nervous, but they were super welcoming and warm. And like, I don't know if you know this about mainline churches, but there's a lot of like older people there. Like I'm for we've had more people coming recently, but for a while we were the youngest people there, and I was nervous, but they were all very welcoming and very kind. They, like, many of them are friends with Ty. Ty is less religious than me, but he will come to church on days that like somebody's doing the liturgy or there's a special event or something to help out. He doesn't go every week, but the other four of us do go every week. And I knew that there would be a lot in conflict. And at first I was like, there are people who there's lots of like community for LGBTQ Christians. I was like, so the people who support that will just support me for being polyamorous too. It's not quite the same, but it's pretty similar. And there's a lot of overlap too. Like a lot of people in the LGBTQ community gravitate toward non-monogamy. And but it turned out to not be true. For instance, like the Reformation Project specifically put out a statement saying that they only support monogamous same-sex relationships in marriage. So yeah, But
I
for
don't know that I've heard. That's interesting because I don't know that I've heard that yet. Although I feel like we currently go to an American Baptist church, and they're very much in support of like the LGBTQ community, but I have not heard anything about non-monogamy.
I
So
mean,
that's
it's also kind
interesting.
of niche, right? Like there are way more people coming out as LGBTQ than non-monogamy, and but like people are way more secretive about it. People don't want to talk about it. Like it's like not only is it seen as like a more of a choice, which like, there's some debate whether it's like inherent in nature or like a choice you make, and it's sort of both really. Like I think that I am inherently like attracted to multiple people. I think there's a reason that in nature some animals are non-monogamous and some are monogamous. Like I think, you know, those behaviors can easily be adapted to humans as well, dependent on whatever factors. But of course, I like also, if somebody really wants to choose monogamy, you can. You're not going to suffer, I think, as much as maybe a gay person or a trans person who has to live under a lie would feel. So I try not to elevate myself to that like level, but I also have a lot of similarities. Um and but there is like a lot more support, but people just need to talk about it more, and not even just like, because it's not even just a Christian thing. It's like non-monogamous people in general don't talk about it. A lot of people just make fun of it. There's lots of drama stories. Like, trust me, if you think, oh, I heard this bad story about my friend's couple that opened their marriage, I've heard dozens and dozens of those stories. But the truth is, we're coming on like a new social kind of institution. We're having growing pains. We're learning how to be in non-monogamous relationships healthily, like more healthfully. And also it's just math. Like if you date more people, there's going to be more messy breakups. Like I've had breakups are the worst part of polyamory to me. They're
I can
devastating.
imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. And and but like for a lot of those reasons, people, and especially if you're like me and they have kids, people don't want people to think, oh, I'm just like out and about town leaving my kids at home every night while I go date a new person every day of the week. So there's just so much judgment around it, even more judgment, I think, sometimes, I think, than for LGBTQ people, because there are a lot of people who believe rightfully that it's not a choice, right?
Yeah.
So it's a difficult position, but it's definitely something that I just do because, again, it's much easier. I'm terrible at lying. I'm terrible at lying to my family. I was terrible at lying to myself. Um, and I can't, like, it would be so disrespectful to like the man Tyler that I love to like pretend that he doesn't exist. I would never do that. Like, he pays like half of my bills. Like, he's like my kid's parent, and that's not something I forced on my kids either. They came to it naturally. It wasn't
Yeah.
like, this is your new daddy. Like, they still call him Ty
Hmm.
because like that's what they called him, but they do say that they have three parents.
Oh.
And again, like this conflict, I was like, well, how can I be a polyamorous Christian? It was more like, well, I'm polyamorous and I'm a Christian, so you're just gonna have to deal with it. And like I try to be respectful, like try to, like, when I think about like, framework of sexual ethics in
Hmm.
Christianity from like a non-monogamous, like a lot of people are like, you probably just think the only ethic is consent. And it's like, yeah, but also, it's not just that, it's also about like living healthfully for yourself, for your family, for your kids. If I go hook up with a random stranger who who doesn't have the best for me in mind, or somebody who's like a dangerous person, then I'm not really serving myself, I'm not really serving
Right.
my family. So there's more to it than just consent in
Yeah.
framing like a Christian sexual ethic around non-monogamy.
Hmm. That's Have you written about that? Because that is a
I
fascinating topic.
am going to be writing about it.
Beautiful, because I'm curious. It's lovely. And I'm sitting over here as a person who is fully monogamous and chooses to be so, but also I am by nature, like I'm the type of person I want to give myself completely to one person, and I can't. And I, as much as I feel that for me, I feel what you're saying for you is your
Yeah.
truth. Like,
Yes.
you're saying, this is who I am. I'm saying, I totally hear you say that. Like, who would I be to say, oh, well, that's not inherent to you? Monogamy is inherent to me. So why
Yeah, for
could that
sure.
not be inherent to you? I just think so. I've heard a couple things, and I want to kind of parse through these with you. I heard on, and I'm not going to remember who said it, but it was on another podcast, and they were talking about polyamory, and I really was curious when they phrased it this way. They said polyamory is like a relationship evolution for people who've mastered monogamy and are ready for like the next evolution of
Mm,
relationship. And I was like, that's really interesting, because I've heard it kind of demoted in some ways, but that really like elevates it to this point that saying, okay, so you think you've mastered relationship with one person. Well, here's a curveball. How about this? Like, here's another way that
yeah.
you can work on, yourself, and on all the mirrors that a relationship is going to hold up to you. So I'm curious what you think about that.
I like to leave space for messy non-monogamy, especially for people like me who are raised in like such a strict expectation of what marriage and relationships are supposed to look like, that I like to leave room for people to fuck to sorry, I don't know if you're allowed to cuss.
Do
For
it, do
Okay,
it,
so
drop
for
it.
people to fuck up in their relationships, in their lives, especially, when if they're deconstructing, getting over purity culture. There's so many like plays into it, and it's so I mean I think, there's some truth to the fact, especially that non-monogamy can be difficult and it requires a great amount of communication, a great amount of emotional maturity, and learning to navigate those things that maybe you wouldn't have to in monogamy. So if when people say like, oh, that's too much work for me, I get it. Like I get why people, like, oh, I want to be happy and safe and like happy monogamous, and like, my sister is monogamous. Like I have so many, most people are monogamous, so like I have lots of monogamous friends, and I think their relationships are wonderful and beautiful, and I don't I like it, so I don't want to like, I also don't want to be like, oh, monogamy is the easy one and non-monogamy is the hard one,
Mhm.
because that's not true. Monogamous
Yeah.
relationships end a lot too.
It
um
may be, I guess, if it's your truth that you're living, it probably is easier for you, because
yeah.
it's harmonious and there's no discord in the way that you're expressing your true
Right.
self. So I could see you saying, well, this feels easier for me because it's true for me.
Yeah. I have to like, a lot of people ask me like the jealousy question, which is like the number one thing I think monogamous people, and like that was like the least of my concerns in non-monogamy. I don't really experience too much jealousy. If it is, it's over something like, oh, you watched this movie without me with them, like, or you like went to this restaurant and I wanted to eat that there and they got it and not me. Um Rather than like, oh, like you have you love this person and you are having sex with them, like that, that doesn't bother me, like that stuff doesn't get me at all. So maybe that part is easier for me if it's part of my inherent nature. I guess I just like, I guess I'm just a little, I see some elements of people who are non-monogamous being a little snobby about it, who are like, like, we're in the more mature, more evolved form of a romantic relationship, and this is the this and I also think it's like a little like scary for new like people who are like, oh, I'm non-monogamous but I don't know what to do. Like you can mess up, you can have big feelings, you can try it out and not and like go back to it, like, or you can try it out and be like, oh, this isn't for me, like I tried it, no, not for me. I think just like people having that inherent like curiosity and explorative nature who might want to try or are non-monogamous, like I want to give space for that.
I love that. That's beautiful. And I'm curious by nature, so I'm always like, I lean to the side of indulging curiosity because I kind of feel like I have this theory that like life is a playground for our soul. And how are you going to play and learn things if you don't get a little messy sometimes? So
Agreed.
like we're not here to live mistake free and then die. I think that's just such a waste of life. Um, but I do have this other thought that popped in when you were talking about. I also feel like we're sort of on this evolutionary path, soul wise, where we're leaning towards more social groupings. Like perhaps our souls are sort of coming together in new and different ways. Like we're experiencing a lot of like intuitive connection, nonverbal communication. And I feel like perhaps it's really interesting because I've heard more and more. I'm in a very progressive area. I'm in upstate New York. So I've heard more and more and more about people being out and talking more about polyamory here, especially. But I sort of feel like perhaps the way in which our souls are evolving, that there's going to be more of that, that this is just a natural evolution of learning to live more in community and do community better than we ever have before. And it's sort of a natural like branching off from there.
Yeah, I'll take you're the far more wise to spirituality and like intuitiveness of that aspect of it. Whereas I'm more of a practical person where it's like, we're living in a pretty rough time. Capitalism is very hard for a lot of people right now. The world is very hard for a lot of people right now. And, there's only so much like intimacy that we can get, I think, online via words. And people are really seeking that out. And maybe they're realizing, like, especially people my age, I'm the only one I know who has kids that are like in double digits and is like 30, how old am I? 35. So like everybody I know is either like just having kids or like has no kids. And people are coming to like, you know, of course, like that's another part of society that's evolving also. And it's like people are wanting more of that community feeling back. And sometimes I wonder if some of the people who are trying non-monogamy, that's actually what they crave, is more of a community situation. And like I'm both. Like I love the community aspect of non-monogamy, but I also like the multiple relationships of non-monogamy and wanting that exploration and just like having these like really, you can have relationship without these strict rules either way, really opens up so much more possibility for like living arrangements and like purchasing houses together, or just like living near each other. And like who's gonna, if you have kids, like you like, if you don't have kids, then like who's gonna take care of you when you die? If you don't have a romantic partner at all, like what is your social life going to be like? And I always try to make it a point to include people who maybe they live alone, or maybe they don't have any kids. And like, even because like even though like I like having multiple romantic relationships, being polyamorous, like I would say most of my friends here in Richmond are polyamorous, not because I'm dating them or any of our people are dating them, my people, but because we have so much in common with the way that we view relationships and the way that we view how they form and what community means to us. And it's a really great feeling, and I don't think you have to be non-monogamous to recreate that. I think you can just like have little queer communities, leftist communities, like whatever, whatever floats your boat, you can get involved and find more people and connect with more people in a real and meaningful way.
Yeah. Yeah. This is so funny. I was just talking about communities. I substitute teach, but I was just talking about communities with kiddos. And we were discussing like the rights and responsibilities and the relationship to the community, being a good citizen. And I'm like, this is fascinating because we really are craving community, and there's so many different ways to get it, but there is an intimacy to community that we're missing with this digital world. Like you
Yeah.
just don't, and it's not even sexual intimacy. It's just being able to
Yes,
sit
definitely not.
across from a person and look them in the eyes and share this space
Yes.
that is it not virtual, as much as I enjoy that we can do this and it's incredible. I think we have to be really conscious about making sure that we are part of communities and that we don't forget how to be good citizens wherever those
Yes.
communities may be.
I don't know if it's just like that I'm a different kind of Christian now where I feel like I take my faith more seriously than I did when I felt like I was just being forced into it by whatever my parents believe, or if it's because I'm non-monogamous. But like I started caring about those things way beyond romance. Like to be honest with you, I rarely date outside of the Ty and Daniel. They date a little more casually, a little more, but like I hardly ever go on new dates or anything anymore, but I still am been like focusing on these like really community aspects of it and like hanging out with other polyamorous people, inviting them over, stuff like that, because I I want I want to cultivate that more in the world. I want to be involved with the people of church of different age groups. I want to be more involved and I have this drive to find more of it.
That's beautiful. I love that. And I love that this is where we've landed because I think people have heard like the authentic relationships tag that I've put on these episodes over the past month, and they're like, oh, it's just about intimacy, or it's just about, dating or marriage relationships. And it's really not. It's just that those relationships, I think, are the ones where we really get the fullest picture reflected back to us of who we are and like how we're presenting in the world, which can be positive or negative. But
Yeah.
it really is about this broad concept of relationships in the sense of community. And I think it's just a beautiful place where we've gotten to with that idea. Like, okay, so you want authentic relationships, you want honesty and clarity and responsive, partnerships, then start with finding a community that you can belong and be a part of, and start showing up there as your whole authentic self and see what happens and go from there.
Yes, definitely.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you feel like is a valuable part of this conversation that you'd want to add in?
I just wanted you to know that, like, no matter what, I mean, maybe some religions are tougher than others, but like that there, even if you feel like in your heart, in your soul, like authentically that you have to choose between one aspect of your identity and another, see if that is true or just something you forced on yourself that society has forced on you. Because I promise you, I don't sit here thinking, oh, like, oh, like, is this the end of the world? Like, I'm not living a life in conflict to me. I'm happy. And I think whatever it is that you want to pursue, you can also be that happy.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. That's a perfect place to end here. So I thank you so much. We have tried, you listeners, we have tried to do this for so many weeks. It's ridiculous, but we finally made it happen. And I'm so glad. I think it was a beautiful conversation and perfect timing. So Jennifer, thank you for joining me. I appreciate you.
Thank you for
All
having
right.
me.
Take care.
Bye.